Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the 26th episode of the Deliberate Talks podcast. Unfortunately, the final one of this season. I'm your host, Dakshin Adyanthaya, and before we conclude this year on a high note, we wanted to ensure that we get the hot conversation of Twitter onto this conversation today. And if you have been missing out on action, you have to stay back to listen to our guest and her wonderful stories about her community. But before that, as the tradition goes, here are some cool facts about Twitter this year. According to SimilarWeb, Twitter ranked 4th globally for web traffic in October 2020. As of November this year, the face with tears of joy emoji was used 3.06 billion times till date. Hashtag COVID-19, hashtag Black Lives Matter, and hashtag Stay Home were three of the most used hashtags this year, highlighted by Twitter. And finally, tweets expressing being grateful and thankful increased by 20% globally, with a particular recognition of doctors that increased in conversation by 135% and teachers that saw a surge in conversation by 30%, along with essential and frontline workers. More about this and what's in store for us in the coming months when it comes to Twitter, right after this intro.
This is the Deliberate Talks weekly podcast, powered by the Pixelated Egg Digital Ventures. Tune in every week to learn something new about digital marketing and entrepreneurship. And now, over to the voice of your host, Dakshin Adyanthaya. Enjoy the show.
So in today's episode, we have a former teacher and a marketing director who today works with Fortune 500 brands to strengthen their digital strategy. She has been featured in HubSpot Academy's social media certification course, as well as their separate course on social listening. Apart from this, you can also find her featured in various ebooks by Social Insider, HubSpot, Talkwalker, as well as articles by The Next Web, Adweek, and Meltwater. Here's introducing Christina Garnett. Hello, Christina. Welcome to the Deliberate Talks podcast. It's lovely to have you on the show today.
No, it's an honor. I love talking about marketing, and anytime I can help someone else, I'm down for it. So thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great. So firstly, let's talk about this amazing thing that happened on Twitter a few weeks back, the marketing Twitter community. A tweet went out, gave an opportunity to many to be a part of something very valuable, and then there was no stopping since then. Firstly, tell me, what is marketing Twitter all about, and how did the idea come into existence?
Sure. So marketing Twitter is a community of marketers from all verticals, sizes, brands you know and love, brands you've never heard of, small business, nonprofit, higher education, corporate, everything in between. And it's basically a community where we can engage with each other, we can talk to each other, ask questions, engage, have conversations, learn from each other. And overall, and most importantly, it's a very positive place where social can be a very destructive and negative place where we're all just kind of slinging our worst opinions at the world, but it can also be a highly positive place. So it really kind of crystallized this year. I've been connected to a lot of marketing people on Twitter ever since I started.
Right.
But this year, because 2020 was so difficult, we've really kind of found ourselves and essentially are trauma bonded. We've all kind of survived this year doing more work, jumping over more hurdles, and dodging more like PR nightmares than we ever have in our entire career. I mean, anyone that's worked in social specifically, but marketing, PR, comms, that's gotten through 2020. I mean, it's like 5 years of experience wrapped up in a year. You're really seeing the best and worst being thrown at you at all times, and being able to think on your toes and be ready to make those really strategic choices almost immediately in order to save brands, to handle crises, things like that. For me, it really started with Julian from Adweek he did a post in February of this year basically saying, like, just did a tweet and said, if you work for a brand, tell me what brand you work for. And if there's another brand that you would like to, like, I'd like to meet, I run so-and-so, and I'd like to meet the person that runs that. And what you wound up having was this thread of brand Twitter where people who were working for Adweek, Pokemon, Aviation Gin, Delta, they're all kind of coming together and having conversations. And it's really lovely because in the past, advertising and marketing and strategy can be extremely adversarial, where you see those people, and even though they're in the trenches like you don't come from a place of empathy. You come from a place of, that's the enemy. That's the person I have to be better than. That's the person I have to beat. Right. And for years like 2020, because it's really kind of broken a lot of us or really weighed us down, that mindset has very much shifted, where we realize that I want everybody to do good work. I want you to, like, if you bring the best work you have, I still want to be able to beat you just because, like, I'm naturally competitive. But I don't want anything bad to happen to you.
Right.
I don't want you to cry at work. I don't want you to not be able to sleep because you're so stressed out and you've been burning out, or at least trying to avoid burnout for months now. So that for me was like a major starting point. And then there's other people along the way, like Brian Boucher created a Slack channel. Vincenzo Landino he's always connecting people, and he's been really great about creating Twitter lists that really highlight diversity. So like people of color, women thought leaders, he's always about creating those lists and really amplifying others. He's fantastic about that. I call him a bridge because that's really what he is. Tori Tidwell created a job spreadsheet, people who were looking, but also companies that were hiring. So there's almost like this meeting point. And I know people who've gotten jobs there. So that was another thing. And then I think I got very lucky to be the person that got to really open that place for a lot of people. Because if you look at the conversations and the responses in the thread,
right,
quite a few were like, I've been lurking. I've been seeing these conversations, but either like I didn't feel like I qualified or I didn't feel comfortable. Or, I mean, when you're putting yourself out there, even as marketers, no matter how talented and experienced we are, if you don't have what we would all deem as like enough social clout, like I don't have enough followers, so even though I work for so-and-so, they're going to think I'm a nobody. And marketers in general, I would argue, like the imposter syndrome is so much of a problem that we constantly doubt ourselves. We constantly are wondering what's next. Can we keep up and continue to do great work with an industry that is changing daily? And this year, hourly. I mean, content that would have worked in the morning doesn't work in the afternoon because of like a new piece of legislation or a travel ban or mask or like indoor-outdoor restaurant regulation. Like you have to keep up and be plugged in like never before. So what you have is these people finally have a safe place where we can all admit that like work sucks, I'm stressed, I'm burned out, I'm struggling. Oh, you're struggling too. Or, hey, I'm applying for a new job. If you can just send me positive vibes. The thing is that for a lot of people in marketing, people don't really have a true concept of what we do. Right. They think they know, but they have no idea. Like, especially for social media marketers, where they think you just play on your phone all day. And I've had people say that to my face, and I'm just like, okay, well, bygones. I know you're not my people. But this creates a really unique place where these people have to, because this has opened doors, they've been able to realize that social can do a lot of good and that social can be a very positive place. And in a year where you can't see people you know and love, people are making real long-term relationships and friendships with people who they've never, like I have friends that if they DM'd me and asked me for a big favor, I'd be like, whatever you need, I got you. Never been in the same room with them before, never met them in real life. But if they ask me for something, I've got them. Right. And so it's a very special place. And one of the best things for me, it's one of the best things that happened this year.
Right, I'm sure. But tell me, Christina, you said that this came into existence in February 2020, but really picked up after the tweet that you recently put out, asking people if they have less than 1,000 followers and are in marketing in some kind of capacity to come out and introduce themselves to the community. just for my understanding, why do you think it took so long to get amplified to this level?
It wasn't really like a conscious effort on my part. The catalyst for sending out the tweet was I just woke up one morning, and as I tend to do, which probably isn't healthy, but I do it anyways, I start my day with Twitter. As soon as I wake up, the first thing I do is I check Twitter because it tells me what I'm waking up. Like, what is the world I'm waking up into? Like, are we in World War III? Like, is there a new baby panda that was born? Are people happy? Are people sad? Like, I can immediately kind of like read the room and have this sense of what I'm going to walk into. And my feed was just so nice because it was just my friends. It was my Twitter family just talking and having conversations, and there wasn't hate and there wasn't just this spewing negativity. It was just this really kind place. And I was just thinking, like, I just really want to share this with people. And so the thing is that a lot of people have shared it. Even I've shared it in the past, but I think it's not enough to share. It has to feel like it's meant for them. So by having that 1,000 follower or less, the people who they're either not on Twitter very often, or they haven't really discovered the best practices for using it, or they just haven't found their people yet, or they just don't feel comfortable or don't know how to enter those conversations. This was basically like, here's this community, you were specifically invited to come, and here's how you can converse. So instead of saying like, why don't you join us? And then be like, great, I don't know what to do. It's, you have a small following. You probably have never been specifically targeted before because you're used to seeing these like the top 10 list or whatever, or the people who are verified. But that specific call out is why I personally think that it did so well, because those people were called out by a metric, but in a positive way.
Right.
And then told, say hi, introduce yourself, tell us what you like to tweet about, make friends. And so it removed the barriers. And that's why I think you had that swell, and then it went viral. And you can see like the use of marketing Twitter. I posted, audience sent me some data visualizations of what happened during that time period. And you can see that there were some conversations earlier in the year, and then all of a sudden it just like went crazy. It spiked. But I think it's because those people, they didn't feel comfortable, or they didn't know how to enter that conversation, or they self-reject. They're like, I don't want to introduce myself. They're just gonna think I'm a loser and I'm trying to like butt into conversations that I'm not wanted. And that whole idea of like, I want to be a part of this conversation so bad, but I don't know how to get started. So this created a really safe place and a safe way for them to do that. And that's what you saw, is people being like, this is okay for me to do this. I know what to say. I know I am welcomed. And then that created that groundswell. And even then you saw people saying like, they were creating caveats, like, I'm not sure if I qualified ... Right. So even though that barrier was removed, they still had to preface it with, I don't know if I'm good enough to be here.
Yep.
And so I think that's what it really comes down to.
Right. But, like you mentioned about the surge and how the conversations are picking up, what do you think this is leading up to? And where do you think this is heading? And how else, or who else can be a part of this apart from the ones who are already in it?
For me, I don't have any set goals for marketing Twitter. It's not mine. I don't own it. I truly believe that the best communities, the true communities, they belong to everyone that gets to take part. So for me, the one thing I want to protect is the vibe. I want it to continue to be a positive place where we all understand that we can learn from each other, we can amplify others, we can lift each other up. I think that that's really crucial for marketing professionals, from like the college graduate and intern all the way up to the people who are thinking about retiring. I think that the landscape is forever changing. You have traditional stuff that still works. You have new ideas that you have to adapt for. It's just like no one knows it all, like nobody. Right. So when you come from a place where we can all help each other, and we all have insights to provide. We all have experiences where we've seen something work or not work, and we want to be able to share that because the internet's a big place. There's room for all of us. So I know that some people want to do like podcasts, and they want to do like Twitter chats, and they want to do conferences. And for me, I'll be 100% honest with you. Like that all sounds great to me, But what I really want is just, and maybe it'll happen at like the next physical inbound or something, or like a conference that's large enough for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
But I love the idea that one day we'll be all in the same room together and we can hug each other and we can chit chat and we can like have drinks and maybe have like brunch, but we can all like just continue that same positivity, but be able to do it in the same room as the people that we like completely bonded with online.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've taken those conversations and now we're putting them into this physical place where I want to sit and talk to you for hours. I want to know what your thoughts are for this. I want to go to a session and kind of see what your thoughts are. Or just like grab a coffee and just like laugh about how ridiculous this year was. Like whatever it is, but
Mm-hmm.
that for me is what I'm most looking forward to. That's the goal for me is taking this really beautiful virtual community and finding a way to make it live physically when we're in the same room together, when we can root on each other, when we can lift each other up, when we can hug each other and just like laugh and just be friends. That's honestly what it means to me. And I don't mind, and I root on anyone who wants to use this community to really amplify it through, like I said, conferences and Twitter chats and AMAs and whatever they want to do, but keep the vibe. Like it still needs to be positive. It still needs to be respectful. It needs to come from a place where like we all have something to offer. And if that's through Zoom calls or whatever it looks like, I want this to continue to be a positive place for everyone that's in it.
Absolutely. Right. Like you mentioned, you can see how positive the community is, always helping out each other. And having everyone under one roof is simply the most productive thing that can happen to everyone. But Christina, I also got to hear this from you. In the community right now, there are multiple engaging conversations already happening, which is wonderful to witness and converse with. Like a gentleman tweeted out about how he gained 40 new followers when he tweeted out to the marketing Twitter community. I'm sure there are many such stories that prevail. Tell me a few great ones and how has it helped someone?
Well, for one, I don't want to name names, but for one woman reached out to me a couple days later. After that, I'd been talking to her before that tweet went viral, and she had been looking for a job. I sent her the job spreadsheet that Tori Tidwell had created that I mentioned earlier. And she was contacted and recruited by she put in her information, and one of those brands that was hiring saw her information, called her from that, contacted her, and she just started that job. Like, I want to say it was Monday of last week, she started. So these aren't just like connections and friendships. These are new jobs. These are new opportunities, which honestly, like that can be life-changing. That can change the course of your life. It could change where you live. It could change who you meet. It could change who you fall in love with. Like it can have a massive effect. I've had others where I did a piece earlier in the year that was about how social media managers can survive.
Mm-hmm.
And I had written it after I decided to leave the agency I was working at, and I was just so burned out, and I was just trying to hold all of the negativity inside myself. And I couldn't take it anymore and just started writing and just threw everything on the page and got it all out of me, like completely cathartic. And when I shared that was a major thing that happened earlier in the year that got a lot of attention too.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a lot of messages from people who, like, my DMs got full really fast with people who were saying, I didn't know how to phrase what I was feeling, but you said it for me.
Mm-hmm.
And others who were saying, I feel exactly the same way, but I can't express this because if I said this, I don't know if I would lose my job. Because mental health has taken a really big hit this year.
Right.
But even though you're struggling and even though you're burning out and even though you're crying at your desk and you don't sleep and you're just stressed all the time and just like you're anxious to the point of absurdity, you still don't want to say anything public because then you worry that you'll just make this horrible situation worse and then you lose your job and then like everything is compounded in a negative way. So a lot of what's happened this year is speaking for people who didn't feel comfortable speaking for themselves, either because they didn't know how or they thought there would be negative consequences. But I've had that. I've had people reach out to me to say that they finally figured out how to use Twitter. Like Twitter finally made sense to them. Others have messaged me to say that, especially during the election, as anyone in the United States would know, social media and all social media was just a mess. A lot of partisan fighting, a lot of just really putrid, hateful things being said about either party. And everyone just like, I need to be here because I need to be updated on news, but that also means I have to watch this. Just like I gotta doom scroll. And what happened was, as people were specifically finding their people and finding marketing Twitter and finding the people they wanted to engage with, their feed completely changed. So they go from this like highly negative experience to a feed that almost feels like it's all of your friends.
Right.
And you are what you consume. And so there were people who were telling me like their feed was transformed. They finally enjoy social again. They've got to meet people that lived in the same city as them that they never knew. So now they can do Zoom calls and they can do meetups. It's changed a lot of people, from user experience to people that they now consider friends. So it's been really nice.
True. Like you rightly mentioned about you are what you consume. And on Twitter, amidst this negativity and the trolls, there is a world of great insights, display of content, and a side of helping each other out, and many more such interactions. And that is why brands also want to invest in Twitter. But when it comes to a feature, particularly like the Twitter list, as a social media professional, Christina, why do you think they are underutilized by a lot of businesses for community building? And how do you think one can make a better use of it?
I absolutely love Twitter lists. They are such a great tool for curation. I specifically love them think about if you were to transform your feed and really kind of niche down into who you wanted to think about, social listen, whatever, being able to create those. For brands, I really like them because you're able to really break down what your needs are. So let's say that you are a brand and you have PR needs. So you could make a list out of the media publications in which you would like to have your brand featured for either earned or paid media mentions. So creating a list that has all of those media types, then you're not only able to do it based on news, but you're able to really kind of look and see all of that content all in one place instead of your normal feed where everything comes together. You're able to specifically look for patterns and be like, well, what kind of stories tend to do well? What kind of stories do they tend to tweet about? What kind of verbiage are they using? Are you seeing any trends? Are you seeing them leaning into certain stories more than others? It's a really great way to be able to narrow your focus. So I very much love being in like the normal feed. I spend the majority of my time there. But it does help to really kind of niche down sometimes to be able to look from a very strategic lens. So the other thing would be influencers. If there's influencers in the space or thought leaders, the word can and cannot be used interchangeably depending on who you ask. But being able to look at those people to see, okay, well, what are they talking about and what conversations are they having? And are they, once you put them on there, are they, because you can pick, especially for Twitter, you can pick people that you think will be fantastic to represent your brand until you like dive into their profile and what they actually talk about like every day. And you're like, oh, that's a horrible idea. But being able to see those people on one list, that's a really great option. You could also do competitors, but I would only do that as a private list because public lists people can see. Private list, obviously, is going to be the stuff that you don't want people like externally to be able to know. Also keep in mind that if it's a public list, they can see what it's called. So I've had, oh my gosh, I've had so many, I've been on lists that I should not have been on based on the name. Or like the ones that I hate was the ones that they put me on a list because they wanted me to follow them back. And I was like, that's not how this is going to work. Like now out of principle, I'm not going to follow you. Like now I'm just, Now you just made me mad. Like now, no, like I'm gonna live on that list for a while. But things like that. So keep that in mind. But I think that there's an opportunity for brands to use lists quite well, especially if they want to. Because I'm a firm believer across social. I mean, like not just Twitter, but all social platforms. Curation is the superpower. A lot of people who don't like social are like, oh, I hate this, or oh, they just showed me the wrong things, or oh, I don't like that. You need to take that time to heavily curate your feed and to be very clear about here's the content that I want to see versus here's the content I don't want to see. Like where you engage and what you touch and what you look for is going to determine what you see. And when that's not what you see, then it's going to be based on who you follow. So you may not, especially on Twitter, you may see stuff that you don't like, but you're seeing it because someone that you follow that you did like, they engaged with that. And Twitter's like, well, if they like it, you'll like it. And that's a really big litmus test for, are you following the right people? If you start seeing content that you don't want on your feed that just goes against you or you don't like, or just is confusing to you, really think about, do you need to mute those channels or do you need to mute the people that you're following or unfollow them? There's definitely opportunities to really think about. And I would really encourage every single person to do this going into 2021. It is an investment in your social sanity. Think about what kind of content you want to see in your feed and the kind of conversations and people you want to converse with, and then really dive down into following, unfollowing, muting, whatever you need to do, especially on Twitter when you can mute specific words. But guard that feed. Right. Because you do have the ability, like you can't curate it 100%, but you can do a really good job that you can make sure that you're having a better experience 100%.
Right. I'm also going to move into a lot of other exciting things that Twitter has in store for 2021, starting with their announcement for verifications. Now, this is a big thing. They're opening the process for everyone in January, and they're also looking to revoke some verified profiles. Let's talk about the importance of it. Is it really that important, firstly, to have a blue tick? And what's your opinion about this whole verification process on Twitter?
Okay, I have two thoughts on this. From a personal perspective, I would love to be verified.
Right.
It's a clout thing. It's an ego thing. I've spoken at national conferences. I've written in blogs that have been in multiple publications. I've hit a lot of what I would consider benchmarks for what would deem someone worthy of verification.
Right.
However, the people that I've seen be verified recently, like this year specifically, have been people that were being impersonated. So it felt more like in the past where it was you just had to have a certain number of followers, or you had to have a certain people following you, or you had to be published in certain things or known for certain things. That was enough for verification. Right. Now it came across where and I could be completely wrong, but from an outsider's perspective, because I don't work for Twitter, from an outsider's perspective, it came across that like they got rid of all of that and they only removed it for like special cases and for people who were being impersonated. There's two people I know that got verified this year, that got verified soon after they made public stances about like, please get rid of these impersonators and get rid of these fake accounts. So I'm leaning towards that being the main reason those were verified.
Right.
I would love to be verified. However, I think the system is completely flawed. For me, I think that moving forward, I think verification needs to come from a place. Verification can go one of two ways. It's either this elitist perspective where you get to be like a micro celebrity on social, which is fine. My problem is, and my other perspective is that I think verification should go more towards actually verifying these people for who they really are, instead of having these like fake accounts that are like spewing hatred, giving death threats, asking people to be their sugar baby, like trolls. I think if we look at it from my personal perspective, I would rather us have a verification process that verifies who people are, so that hopefully it will remove a lot of bad actors. Right. And it will make people more careful about the kind of content that they're creating. Like they're not threatening people, they're not giving death threats. I think that those people create a bigger problem than my hurt ego over not having a check beside my name. If you made me choose, and it was like, you either get a verification or we switch the verification process to minimize bad actors and create a safer place, I'm going to go with that option.
Right. Makes sense. Another exciting feature also includes spaces. Twitter's evolving into also the audio space, allowing one to break the character limits with voice. Where do you think that is going with Twitter?
I like that. I find that Twitter Spaces makes more sense for Twitter than Fleets does. I'm definitely not a fan of all of the story reboots. Twitter Spaces is clearly reminiscent of Clubhouse.
Right.
I'm hopeful that it will be. I'm hopeful that it will be a good place. I can see it being fantastic. I can see it being a great opportunity to have like AMAs and like micro interviews and panels, and I could see it doing quite well. The biggest problem with Clubhouse for me, and the one that I hope that, and Twitter's already making some moves towards this, but it's a highly elitist, misogynistic place. There's been a lot of abuse towards women. There's been a lot of negative content about people of color on Clubhouse. It's got a lot of baggage associated with, and also just this general lack of moderation, that they thought that they would just invite key people and then it would take care of itself. So you have this scarcity. So now everyone wants to be a VIP and get an invite. But then you get in there and it's a dumpster fire because everyone is, well, not everybody, but some people are making sexist comments, or they're making racist comments, or it creates a problem. Right. So I hope, and I know that Clubhouse realizes that there are issues. I hope that there will be a place for people to be able to have these dialogues and discourses. And if they disagree, great. I mean, that's how you get new ideas, is when you're thinking differently than others. But I definitely want Twitter Spaces as well as Clubhouse to showcase more of the best of us, not the worst of us, if that makes sense.
Right. Nice. Apart from this, also another conversation is Twitter announcing the discontinuity of Periscope from March 2021. They stated that the truth is that Periscope app is an unsustainable maintenance mode state. What does this mean for businesses, and what do you think is in store for broadcasting, considering live and broadcasting has been an important aspect of events during the lockdown? What do you think is in store for Twitter when it comes to broadcasting?
I would say that most brands aren't really utilizing Periscope effectively anyway. So it's not going to be a big loss for a lot of them. I find that Periscope is mainly used by like the users and what they're watching. So if it actually would probably help. For instance, I know a lot of people that would watch UFC fights and they would actually run them. They would like do video of their TV through Periscope. So getting rid of Periscope actually will probably help quite a few brands, because you're not going to have that piracy element happening. So I can see that being a benefit for them. I think what's interesting is that they get rid of Periscope, but they keep Fleets. It's very much, they're trying to figure out what video looks best for them. Like what video feature makes the most sense. I personally, video is obviously going to be a major issue for all brands and for social media as a whole, because you need those concepts. For me, though, it's what does, and I would argue this for any social platform, because I think they've all forgotten, what do you want to be? And what is your user culture? I think that's why you have all these social media platforms copying each other instead of fixing the problems that their users actually have. And so a lot of people have, a lot of these not brands, but these social media platforms they've kind of stopped looking at their user culture. Instead, they look at others' user culture. So just because something does well on TikTok doesn't mean it's going to do well in somewhere else. Just because it does well in Instagram doesn't mean it's going to do well in something else, because when you're there, you behave quite differently. The way someone looks at content on Facebook versus YouTube is quite different. It's the kind of content that does well, how long you're really kind of accustomed to see things. You might watch one or two minute videos on Facebook, but you could watch a 2-hour documentary on YouTube and not feel bothered either way. Those user cultures they're conditioned to behave a certain way and how they consume content on each platform, but yet we copy and paste from other platforms, assuming they're going to engage the exact same way. So you're asking someone to say, like, I know you're on Twitter, but I want you to act like you would on Instagram. Or I know you're on Instagram, but I want you to act like you would on TikTok. And that what you're doing is you're removing your strategic advantage of differentiation. Like having a separate user culture is a great thing because that's going to be how you can keep those people there. If you're able to create an experience that further continues that. And you can see this with marketing Twitter. Would marketing Twitter have done as well on Instagram or as well on TikTok or as well on Facebook when what you're seeing is this need for communication and conversation in a very public place? And the fact that, I mean, you could do it as a Facebook group, but a Facebook group, you'd have to be approved to get in. Versus marketing Twitter on Twitter, where it's an open platform, you're able to dive right in as soon as you see a tweet. So these little nuances of how you behave and can behave on these platforms dictate future user culture. And then they build that and then they throw it out the window so we can all have stories. It makes no sense to me.
Right. And you think Twitter is also in this trial basis phase where it's been doing a lot this year, like the fleets, the spaces, even the double retweet feature and more. Do you think this is typically an example of what you're trying to say?
I would say that both fleets and the way that they switched functionality for the retweet, both of them showcase their need to adapt and them understanding they need to adapt. But they both are done very differently. So fleets is very much this stories are doing quite well. A lot of people are spending their time on Instagram. So that's kind of where we're going with that. Versus the retweet switch, which was very much aligned with slowing down misinformation, making it a little bit harder to be able to retweet something instead of just immediately retweet something without seeing what it meant or if it was misinformation, because a lot of people were doing like gut check. This is someone I like, they're angry about something. I agree with them on most things, so I will in turn also be angry. I'll retweet and we'll just espouse this like negative rhetoric. And it worked because it did lower the number of retweets that were done. So that made sense. That change actually in the very beginning, I was like, this is stupid. But it was effective. It did make it harder for those people who just weren't willing to take that extra step in order to share, whether it was real misinformation, something that angered them or whatever. Versus, so that is like, what can we do to minimize bad agents in our environment? Perfect. I'm down with that. After having seen how it worked, I'm completely okay with that. The fleets thing, however, is shiny syndrome. It's what can we do to be like everybody else? Everyone has this jacket. Everyone has these shoes. Everyone has this. I want to be just like them. I want to be at the cool kids table. Everyone else is doing it. I want to do it too. Here we go.
Right. That
makes less sense to me because Twitter's my favorite platform out of all of them, and it's because of how it's different. I don't love Twitter because of how it's alike others. I love Twitter for how it's different. So at the end of the day, how can you create an experience that's different, that your user culture will be able to get what they need and in a positive way? And so I think all social media platforms are clearly trying to figure it out, trying to figure out what they want to be to people. And a lot of times they completely forget why someone goes there versus other places. And so I see people doing fleets. I mean, people are doing them. I personally don't look at them because that's not why I'm there. And I know I'm not the only person that does that, but I also know people who love fleets and are using it daily. So it really comes down to like personal user choice.
Right. Wonderful, Christina. That kind of brings us to the end of our first round of conversation. It's time to now move on to the next one right after this plugin.
Friend us on your socials and let's connect.
Right then, time to change gears for the second round, which is a rapid fire round. And this will typically have 5 to 6 questions for you in a more lighter side and would need you to be more prompt. So ready for this?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So if you or your business isn't focusing on Twitter strategy, you're missing out on, complete the sentence.
You're missing out on customer engagement. When people are complaining or lifting up brands, the majority of the ones that you can actually see and publicly engage with are going to be on Twitter versus Facebook, where it might be a private personal Facebook page, or it might be on Instagram and they don't tag you. Twitter being open, you're able to communicate and find people who are tagging you, mentioning your brand by name, but not doing it as a hashtag or a mention with an @ but you're able to specifically directly talk to people who want to learn more about you, who want to complain, who want to praise you. It is the most intimate social touch point you can have. And it's a huge lost opportunity.
Okay. 5 of your favorite Twitter handles from the marketing Twitter community.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I'm thinking this is going to be hard. I'm gonna say, okay, Alexa Heinrich. I love her. Her handle is #HeyAlexa. She does a lot of conversations about accessibility, and she's also a total badass. I love her to pieces. I would also say Jenny Lee Fowler. She does digital strategy for MIT. Her handle is @the_Jenny_Lee. She's brilliant and also just one of the kindest human beings you'll ever meet. I would also do Matt Navarra. I love Matt. He knows that. He's my go-to if you ever want to have news, updates, you want to know what's going on, what's happening, and in marketing and Twitter, globally, all of it. Troy Sandage, find Troy. I love him. He's always sharing his knowledge. He's always positive. He's always lifting others up. He's amazing, like absolutely amazing. And then I have to do Brienne Fleming. She does Pop Chat on Fridays. She's gotten to the point where I can't see Britney Spears gifs on Twitter without thinking about her. She's just very fun, but in like a good way, not in an annoying way. Like I would totally hang with her and she would make me laugh and we'd probably watch Mean Girls. She's a good time and she's brilliant. She's a marketing professor in Florida and she's absolutely fantastic. So that would be my 5.
Nice. Okay. Your favorite Twitter feature?
My favorite Twitter feature is it's an ad, but it's when you can like something and it creates an emoji, it activates an emoji. Right. You can do it as like an ad feature. I absolutely love that. And hash flags would be my number 2.
Okay. 3 to 5 lists every marketer or individual should be a part of on Twitter.
I would go on to Vincenzo Landino's list, and he has like tons of lists. I would go for any of those. They're all absolutely amazing. Shan has one, which is a marketer's it's like a marketer's beginner guide or whatever. I would definitely be a part of that. His list was like pre-marketing Twitter. And then anything that's about Twitter Smarter as a Twitter chat, I would look at those too. Madeline Sklar has some great ones.
Right, absolutely. And how much time should one spend on Twitter every day, every week to nurture their connection and community?
There's no magical number because I feel like I live there rent free. When I'm not working, I'm there because that's where my family, my non-family family lives, where my friends are.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. Actually, it's rent free.
Yeah, it's my non-blood family. My non-blood family is on Twitter. I would start small. It can be very easy to get stuck there. It's not TikTok addictive. It's not on that level, but it's close for me because that's where I get to talk to my friends every day. I would start with a couple minutes here and there. I think especially if you're a social media manager or if you're a brand, you need to be prioritizing what social media platforms are most important to you and like really breaking down where you're going to spend time on each. And for some people that can look like 5 minutes a day. For others that can be an hour. It really depends on your goals and your needs. But Twitter is the one channel that it never feels like work to me. Others, I feel like I need to be purposeful and I need to do this and I need to do that. Twitter, I've gotten to the point where I'm my truest self there. So whether no one likes me, whether everyone likes me, I would tweet the same thing.
Okay. And the last one for you in this round. How does 2021 look for you? And what do you think is excitingly in store for Twitter in the coming year?
2021, probably around the summer, because it's going to take that long until everyone gets vaccinated. I'm hoping that we go into 2021 with a lot more empathy for each other. I hope that we go in understanding that we've all survived this year for better and for worse, and we all have scars to prove it. So I hope that we'll be kinder and more empathetic in the new year. I hope that we'll also not fill our January with all of these like goals for ourselves that are just absurd. Every year in January, we all want to lose 50 pounds. We all want to walk 3 miles a day. We all want to read 10 books a year, like a month. And it's just like, at the end of the day, like, I hope that everyone gives themselves grace next year. I hope that your New Year's resolution is to find what really makes you happy, and that's where you put your energy, instead of like ticking off these boxes because you feel like you're not a success if you don't do this and this and this. And I think we've all kind of seen that success looks different for different people, and someone else's success wouldn't feel like success to me, and vice versa. So being kind to ourselves, to others next year. I hope that starting in the summer, we'll be able to actually meet in person. We'll start to be able to travel and have meetups and have really exciting content. And I'm also hoping that we'll be a lot more creative in the future, because we've all kind of been stuck at home with ourselves and our thoughts. And then we finally get to really expand on those once we're able to travel and meet each other and be a part of the world again.
Right. Nice. Great round, Christina. Time for our last segment now. And this round is a question from a thread. And the question states, what are the best and easiest ways to build a bigger community of relevant business category or professionals? And if one needs to build a marketing Twitter-like experience, how does one need to approach it?
I would determine what that group needs to look like. What's the goal? Is there a specific, if you were gonna call it one thing, what would you call it? So what is the heart of that community? So marketing Twitter, the heart is marketing. We could all talk about marketing until like our heads fall off, and some of us do. Or it's a community Twitter, or it's startup Twitter, or it's finance, like fintech Twitter. Find out what that community is gonna like. What is the heart, like the heart topic of that group? Then identify who's already talking about those things, engage in those conversations, name it as to what it can be, and then having those conversations in DMs too. How can it live on Twitter, and then where can it live elsewhere? Is it in a Slack channel? Is it in a Facebook group? Who is already a part of that community without it being named? That was the thing too. A lot of the people that were already a part of marketing Twitter were a part of it before it had a name, before it had like a specific title. And so when it was named, it became very powerful and was able to grow quite extensively after that. But you have to go back. You have to start with the basics. Like, who are these people? What's important to them? What do those conversations already look like? And then find out, are there people that are already there that are starting to grow things, that are starting to put things together? Do you have any bridges? Do you have any people who are advocates for those groups and those conversations? And then slide into their DMs and just be like, hey, I love what you're doing with this community, and I'd love for it to grow more. Do you want to do like a Zoom with everybody? Do you want to do a Facebook group? Do you want to do a Slack channel? And then start conversations, naming them, like, hey, FinTech Twitter, would love to hear your thoughts on such and such. Would love to, how do you do this and this and this in order to blank? To start with questions and engaging and having those conversations and just slowly doing that build. And then the thing that also helped with me was I'm still finding ones I didn't have a chance to retweet because Twitter cut me off like twice that day. Mm-hmm. But I'm still finding tweets that were responding to those. And what I did was I retweeted them. So not only were they seen if people dove into the thread, but they were seen by people who followed me. So they're automatically getting more engagement and more reach from that. And the thing about a good community builder, in my opinion, is it's not about them. It's about what they're doing and the people that they're trying to amplify. And knowing that amplifying others doesn't hurt them. I'm a firm believer that a candle loses nothing by lighting another candle. And good community builders do that.
Right. Lovely, Christina. This has been a really good conversation, and I'm glad to converse with you beyond the Twitter world and hear some of your cool stories from your community. I look forward to also meeting a lot of people from the community and the meetup in the near future whenever it happens. I had a wonderful time today conversing with you and hosting you on this episode. I hope you had a good time too.
I did, absolutely. It was wonderful.
Great. I wish you and Marketing Twitter a new year full of surprises and best wishes. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for making it to the Deliberate Talks podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, that's the end of today's episode. And while the year is coming to an end, so is the first season of the Deliberate Talks podcast. It's been a great experience week on week for 26 weeks without a break. But this isn't a break. It's going to be a fresh start next year with season 2 and with some more amazing people with a lot of new stories. But still, if you have any feedback about the show for us to consider for the new season, please mail it to thedeliberattalks@gmail.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Amazon Audible, and the social media platforms of the Deliberate Talks and the Pixelated Egg Digital Ventures. See you next year. Until then, happy holidays and don't forget to inspire and be inspired.